Hello, welcome to the floor under our HyperTenere. That was terrible. That was not good. Let's try this again. Hello, welcome to the floor under our HyperTenere. You're actually going to spend a little bit of time down here. Kind of looks like an egg. How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to Make It and Break It. My name's Andrew. Today, we're doing a little bit of work on our HyperTenere. So right now I'm on the crawler because this is actually a position you'll get in on this bike on a semi-regular basis. This is an older bike, which means its service intervals for things like oil changes are actually pretty short. This thing's like a oil change every 3,000 miles sort of motor. Which, if you're doing a lot of adventuring, means you're going to be down here quite a lot. So, we've gone through and we've made a skid plate that's actually pretty stable. I'm relatively happy with that. And we've got all of our crash bars and things. One of the important things you do want to check before you sign off and call everything good is, does everything actually work for the way you want to use the bike? And that means, can I change the oil without removing any of the crash protection? The key thing about that is trying to clear the oil drain pan, the oil drain bolt. So for that, it's actually right down here. Where is it? I'm on the wrong side of the bike for this. Yeah, there it is. The oil drain bolt is actually right down here. And so we specifically designed this so that we could get in on this oil drain bolt and drain the oil without ever pulling the skid plate. Oh, God. And the other part of this is we want to be able to get to the filter. So while this drains, you can see right here in front of us is our oil filter. Now, our protective stuff is all up here. And we're actually generally pretty clear. I was debating on putting some sort of like plate that comes down from maybe this mount, which is where the old coolant reservoir mounted, and down over here to like cover the filter from an impact or something like that. But it's pretty protected with the transmission case or the crankcase, whatever this is here. And I mean, this is a plastic sprocket cover, but that kind of protects everything in here from at least nominal amounts of damage. So I think we're going to leave that for now and let this drain out. And then we're actually going to pull all of this crash protection off. Alright, so we're back over here. We've got everything disassembled. We're back over here. We're putting all of our steel pieces back in the vise and wire wheeling. Because in the meantime, when we've been sitting here, a bunch of salty sand has fallen on a lot of our steel pieces, and you get some surface rust in from the salt and everything else. So before we go coat this, and I got some Duplicolor truck bed liner we're going to go coat here. I do want to get rid of all of that rust and scuff up the surface. So we're going to run our wire wheel on this thing, get that surface rust cleaned up, and then start painting all this stuff. So we've got our pieces hung up here. We got our mounts. This is our crash bar and our skid plate, obviously. So we prepped it using the wire wheel, you guys saw that earlier, as well as some 220 grit sandpaper to kind of rough up the surface, and then ran some acetone over it to get rid of any sort of leftover oils or contaminants or anything else. Now what we're going to use is a Duplicolor truck bed liner, and hopefully I don't spray all over everything that I don't want to make super dirty. So we're going to see how this goes, I guess. How bad could it be? Alright, so I'm here replacing my filter, and this is a PSA for all of you who replace your own. Do not over tighten your oil filter, because all it does is make it really freaking hard to take it off when you heat cycle it a bunch of times. This oil filter was on so tight, I actually had to take a punch and a hammer and drive it into the oil filter because I couldn't get a strap wrench on there tight enough. I went and got a friggin' oil socket that fits the filter, but that wouldn't go on tight enough. Just do yourself a favor, or if you're working on someone else's car, do them a favor. Don't put the oil filters in so tight. Unless you're legitimately running a trophy truck on a Baja 1000, your oil filter doesn't need to be that tight. It just doesn't. Rant over. We'll continue on with this. So we're waiting for our crash protection to dry here. I did want to go over this little thing. So I did relocate where I wanted to put the coolant overflow tube. Coolant overflow canister. I did have this originally on the crash bar itself, but I was sitting there and thinking about it and thinking, well, if this thing goes down on the left side and it has any sort of skid, it's probably going to wear through the zip ties that go ahead and hold everything together. Then I'll have to keep re-zip tying it a bunch. Where I can move it in on this little support piece right here, and it'll be inside the crash protection. And be in a more fixed position. It's much less likely to rotate around now. So just a little bit of a better spot, I think. And yeah, and saw me jankily putting some coolant from our old bottle into this one. I probably should have done a coolant flush, but this coolant's pretty new, relatively speaking. So it's got very few miles on the coolant, so we might as well just keep it in there and keep it running for a while. Once we figure out levels, we might do a whole coolant flush for it, but right now, it's good enough. And while we're on this weird grab bag of an episode, workday, I did want to cover a couple things that I made for this bike. One thing. So, when I took off the front intake, it essentially leaves an open intake hole right in here, so the normal ram air intake comes around over here and mounts up somewhere up here, right? And I didn't like that idea. There's a whole intake filter. You're not really worried about sucking in dust or that sort of thing, because that's what the filter's for. The low volume, the low velocity area of the intake really serves to get out some moisture, which the intake box can also deal with. But I didn't really like the idea of riding around in a rock jumping up and into my intake system. So I actually went and 3D printed some caps that look like this. So this is a cap. I printed this out of polycarbonate, which is the same material that they make bulletproof glass out of. So when you print it right, it's actually very tough. This one I broke on install because it was a little too small. But these are now sitting in there. You can see how this is kind of set up. If we can get this to focus. Focus on that. So this goes in and sits on the place the normal intake runners would sit on. And you can see that little gap in it, and that gap actually serves to let it, well, normally what it would let it do is let it flex just a little bit. When it has a thicker wall, that is, it lets it flex some. And we set it in these, we set a little hose clamp in these channels. Let's see if we can get this to focus. You can see that channel right there. So we set a hose clamp in that and clamp it down on those intakes. So this should stop big rocks from getting in, but hopefully doesn't create too much of a restriction on intake, so that we don't have, you know, problems in power. I don't think we really will, and to be fair, this thing probably won't have problems at the speeds and loads we're going to put on it, but you know, I wanted to make sure we're keeping some certain amount of protection on the bike. And while we're waiting for our crash protection to dry, we'll just finish off our oil change. We've got everything buttoned back up. We filled it up with what looks like the appropriate amount of fluid. So we're gonna turn it on and run it, check for any leaks, and then check and make sure the levels are okay and nothing's spurting out of the engine. So to do that, we're gonna have to take this thing, which is gonna come up in a different video. This is a prototype for our front setup, and hook all of our stuff back in, and so we can at least pay attention to what's going on the bike. Oh, kill switch. Okay, I waited till the next day to shoot this part because I wanted it to be dry before I installed it. Let's get this line out of the way. But there we go. Parts are in. Everything's mostly dry. I like the kind of matte black, sort of rough finish. It kind of goes with the rest of the stuff right here. I'm knocking stuff all down. I probably will paint the fasteners or get black coated fasteners. But everything's looking really good and fitting really good. As we come over here, you can see this stuff's all sitting in there pretty well. And I'm really kind of digging the black. I think a matte black is going to be a very large part of this build. So, and this is our final location. You can see coolant, you can actually get that cool green. The coolants actually come from the overflow into our overflow tank. So everything seems to be working there, and there are no big leaks. That's just a little bit of oil left from the filter change down there. So no big leaks. So I think our system is pretty much proven itself, and we've got all of our crash protection painted and in its final place for now. So I think we're gonna call it there. Kind of a grab bag episode today, but we got a decent amount of stuff done, and our crash protection here is now basically in its final form, so that's pretty exciting too. So thanks for watching, guys. Again, my name's Andrew. This is another Make and Break It YouTube channel video. Like, comment, subscribe if you like motorsports, technology, and trying to bring some new techniques for fabrication into your home garage shop. Check out the rest of our videos. Ding that bell icon thing. This outro is getting a little weird. But anyway, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll catch you later.